So why go into business thinking that you're going to quit your day job in 12 months? Like, that's just not how it works.
For someone maybe just starting out that's not quite there yet, what should they be focusing on?
Yeah, good question. The biggest thing is...
Welcome back to Wildly Empowered Women. Today I have a guest on who you may recognize the beautiful voice of, Sandra Joe.
If you want to change your life, you have to be prepared to change your life.
This woman is literally a walking encyclopedia on money, finances, investment, security, freedom.
When you are building a business,
I could not agree more with everything you just said. What should we really be across in our business numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Welcome back to Wildly Empowered Women. Today I have a guest on who you may recognize the beautiful voice of from episode number 20, Sandra Joe. She is, oh my goodness, if you didn't hear that podcast episode, you need to go back and make the time to listen to it because there was so much value dropped in that episode around being financially savvy. Also the link to sex and money, which was a great conversation. And just so much value dropped around self-worth. So it was a conversation I absolutely adored. And now I'm very grateful to have Sandra on again. She is a multi-passionate business woman and she's an entrepreneur. She's a podcaster as well. And she's a former certified financial planner turned financial coach. And this woman is literally a walking encyclopedia on all things money, finances, investment, security, freedom. So she particularly knows that a lot of women struggle to feel confident with their finances, and I find it very empowering to talk to her about this because she's so passionate about helping women and couples as well to have proper education around money and negotiation, and most importantly, the self-worth behind the earning potential, which is a huge one. So she works with a lot of bold women to increase their financial literacy, remove their limiting beliefs and fears, and increase the dollars in their bank account through comprehensive financial coaching. She's born and raised in Vancouver in Canada. So she's all the way over in Canada for this episode. And she's got an incredible Instagram, which I will include in the show notes. It's makethatmoney.honey, HUNNI. So go and check her out. And we won't go too deep into her story on how she got into this line of work because we went really deep and it's such an incredibly inspiring story. So definitely listen to episode 20. But what I did want to talk to Sandra about today, and we just had such a juicy conversation about this, is how can you actually start to invest your money wisely? And how do you get to the point of not living month to month and actually having the money to invest in the first place? So before we get into that topic, I would love to just remind the listeners, and maybe just for a little bit of context, Sandra, like for you to share, who do you predominantly work with now? Because you used to work with really high net worth clients, which meant they had $1 million or more invested with the firm that you were working with. Then when you went out on your own and now, you know, with your own coaching business, who's your main client now?
Yes, I love that question. And thank you so much for having me back. I have been so excited about getting ready for this since we chatted last week. And I have to say, episode 20, I didn't even have to re-listen because I remember when we did that. And that would have been, like 14 to 16 months ago that we did that. It was one of your earlier episodes, and you've had your podcast going for a while now. And I remember that being so far my favorite interview that I've ever done. So if you are listening, please go back and listen. It was the best story I've ever shared so authentically. And we were actually just talking about how I'm going to start using that on my own social media now. But yeah, so basically I started my business. I originally was working with high net worth clients, and just for an age reference, we're talking 55 years plus. And these people had well and truly made it. They were preparing for the next stage of their life, how to give a legacy to their children and grandchildren, how to prepare for retirement, how to downsize properties and move to their, dream retirement home or whatever it was, wrapping up their businesses and preparing for that sort of winding down stage of life. when I was working with these people, what I realized was they were all former, very passionate business people. And they had had this success over many, many years, and it had accumulated over 15 to 20 years to eventually make them wealthy, high net worth clients. But what I realized is that working with their children, working with their younger generation was actually what fired me up more. Those were the people that really needed the hand holding, the being able to have that sounding board to ask these questions that seem stupid, but then they don't know who to ask because they go to the bank and the bank is just trying to sell them a bank product or get them into a mortgage or some sort of investment or an insurance broker. There's nobody out there that was really giving you an unbiased opinion about every aspect of your financial picture that aligns with your personal goals. And this is where I had this ethical conflict when I was working as a financial planner of, I don't need to charge somebody a $6,000 ongoing fee when all they need is the education to go put something into practice for the next 10 years and just go do it. And they need a set, they need a strategy, they need a plan. And it's like, okay, now go do it. Come back and pay me hourly if you need help along the way or if things change. But I don't need to have you on a $6,000 retainer. What I need to do is watch you go away and try it, then come back to me with questions. And ultimately, who I'm working with now is what I like to call the wealth accumulators. So we had the former, high net worth clients that had already accumulated that wealth. They're sitting on their nest egg and they're trying to enjoy their freedom life now. But how did they get there? What did they do in the earlier years to become high net worth clients? And those are the people that I'm working with. It's hungry entrepreneurs, dual income households, young children at home managing daycare, school pickups, online businesses, one salaried employee buying their first home, renovating their first home, figuring out how to put their kids through school, whether it's private school or public school. These are the years between the ages of sort of 30 and 45. I don't like to put exact brackets on it, but call it 28 to 48, right? Those are the years that people need the most support because literally every 6 months is a new financial decision, is a change in your circumstances, is a change to your career, your job, your family life. Maybe you're getting married, maybe you're getting divorced, maybe you're having another child. Every single year, you're having a drastic financial milestone. And what I love to communicate is that I want to be that coach in your corner that every time one of these milestones arises, whether you come through my program and finish, you know that you can come back to me and ask these questions when you're unsure about what to do when that new thing comes up. So really what I'm working with now, and as we talked about on our last podcast, I had some group coaching programs. I had this, I had that. What I've realized now with my business is there's really two people that I work with. There is the people that cannot afford the private client coaching, but they want to get their feet wet and start learning about, the absolute basics of finances, financial literacy, understanding debt, understanding income, how to get a mortgage, all of these little tax implication things that nobody teaches us in school. So I've got my virtual courses, which are available on my website, and there's a couple that are going to be launching this year in 2023. And then I've got my private client coaching programs where I work directly one-on-one with ambitious, hardworking wealth accumulators who are looking to improve their finances, know that they need to do something different, and are ready to take action to actually creating a solid plan that they can stick to for their future.
When you're explaining who you work with, I'm like, that's me. And it's most of the listeners, and we are in that bracket. And there's so much value to be dropped in this episode because we are mostly in that bracket, right? Of the years that we can really accumulate the wealth. So what we had such a good conversation about on Instagram last week, which is where this episode has sort of been born from, was around investing in general and specifically in property, which I was so excited to hear from you on property because, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with this, there are so many options for investments, and we'll get to that. And it can be a bit overwhelming. And, you know, the one that we are most familiar with, most people think about, is investing in property. And, you know, a lot has happened with interest, particularly in Australia here. We've had 11 interest rate rises in the last 12 months, and it's killing people. Like, it really is a huge impact. So I'd love to talk about the topic of investing in property and that long-term view, short-term view. Like, what do you suggest when someone's looking at investing in property?
Yeah. And this is probably one of my favorite topics because being from Canada, but having lived in Melbourne, Australia for 7 years before the pandemic, I very much can say that the property market in Melbourne and in Australia is very similar to that of Canada. So I actually just created an online virtual course about this because so many people ask this question that I was like, I just need to package this and get it out there to the world because more people need to understand what they're getting themselves into before making one of the largest financial decisions of their life, right? It will be the largest investment purchase that most people will ever make. So making sure that you have at least the foundational knowledge before you start getting excited and walking into your dream home that you maybe can't afford, maybe it's a bit of a stretch. You love it. You love the fireplace. You love the bedrooms and the closets, and you get excited about it. But really understanding this purchase before you make it and going in with eyes wide open, asking good questions, who to work with, who you can trust in this space is so, so important, regardless of what country you're in. So one of the most common things that I hear people say is they want to invest. Their number one goal is to buy their first home. And it's a psychological ownership that we feel that we go, okay, if I own my first home or condo or apartment, wherever you live, it means I made it financially, right? It's like, I made it. I did the thing. I got the mortgage. I saved the deposit, the down payment, and I made it. And it's this proud moment, like when you buy your first car in cash versus buying your first home, you're just overjoyed. But there's so many things that we need to know about buying a home that can come up as a surprise to us later. For example, the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance. When you're renting, if you pay $2,000 a month, that's all you have to pay. You pay your internet, you pay your electricity and whatever, but you are not paying anything else other than that $2,000. When you have a $2,000 mortgage, your roof could go, your hot water tank could go, you could have an infestation of pests in the wall, you could have some leak in your floor, or the apartment above you could have a leak which causes damage in your place, and then all of a sudden you have to move out for repairs for 4 months. There's all different kinds of risks associated with buying a property. So when people are getting into property for the very first time, what they typically look at is what they need for the deposit and how much they can afford in the mortgage payments, and a little buffer in case their income fluctuates or in case mortgage rates go up and down. Now, what they don't do is they don't have an emergency cash account that they can access for things like an unexpected $10,000 maintenance repair, for things like the $6,000 property tax bill that they get at the end of the year that is not included in your mortgage payments, or the city has to do a repair and all of a sudden your land, your property goes up by $500 a month in terms of some sort of maintenance fee or strata or building manager fee. There's all these different things that people go, oh yeah, but that's not very likely. It's very likely. And it puts a lot of financial pressure under new homeowners that are not prepared and have never experienced this before. So being a first-time homeowner is, yes, it's a very exciting time. No, I'm not discounting the importance of having home ownership because I think it's a beautiful thing, but I think it is important to go in with this eyes wide open. And whatever that amount is that you've got sitting aside in cash, you're not touching it. It is an absolute emergency so that if something comes up, you're not all of a sudden having to put some major maintenance bill on your credit card, on some personal loan, on something that's got an exorbitant interest rate that is going to wipe you out and you will not be able to catch up financially because of it. So we want to say you've got to have that emergency cash buffer sitting aside, and it's not your daily checkings account that you're going in and out of. It's set and forget, out of sight, out of mind. So that's number one, is most important. Number two is really understanding what you can afford. So coming back to the emergency cash buffer, if you're spreading yourself so thin every month because you purchased a property that was a little bit out of reach, but you fell in love with it and now you're stretched financially, all of a sudden your mortgage payments are going to be your number one priority. But you still need to have a social life. You still need to get to and from work. You still need to take the odd holiday once in a while. And if you are not financially prepared for those things, what do you think people do? They use their credit cards. Then they rack up tens of thousands of dollars of debt because they can't make endless sacrifices in their life in order to live in their dream home. And it just chips away slowly. You might start with, 3 or 4,000 of credit card debt, and then it might jump up to 7. And you're like, oh, that next time I get that bonus, I'll just pay it off. But then that bonus ends up going to an unexpected house repair, or it goes into somebody's wedding, or their tax that they didn't realize that they owed, or some other thing. There's always a reason that we don't use these lump sums to pay off things like our credit cards, right? And this ultimately is the spiral that people go down when they are not financially prepared for their first property. So the reason I'm telling you this is not to scare you. It's to prepare you so that when you are going into your largest property or largest asset purchase of your whole life, you know what your budget is, you stick within it, you've got your emergency cash buffer, and you don't touch it. It's strictly for that, property related things. And also understanding that when you are looking at investments, it's not just about the property, right? We can invest our money into many different ways. So working with somebody who is a financial specialist, a financial coach, to understand what all of your options are so that you're not just focusing on this one thing that might be 5 to 7 years out of reach, right? We go, oh my God, to save the deposit, to save the emergency cash buffer of whatever, call it $30,000, plus to make sure that we're staying within my budget, that's unattainable. A lot of people think that'll never happen to me. I never had family support. I never got an inheritance. It's a story that I hear all the time, and yet there's thousands of people out there doing it every day. So the next segue is, well, how do you get there if you don't have help? And this is what I love about investing is you can save and invest at the same time, and it doesn't have to be in property. So when you start getting that savings, and whether you're a self-employed business owner or whether you are a salaried worker, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you choose to put away at the end of the month, you're putting it away into some sort of income producing vehicle, something that is going to appreciate over time, and not just what the bank interest gives you, because that's less than inflation.
Wow. So good. Let's keep going on investing.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you wanted to jump in there, but basically what I mean by this is when we look at saving, let's just use round numbers. Let's say we want to save $100,000 and we say that's our deposit. It's 10% of our $1 million property. That's what we want to put down. And we go, right now, I've got 30 grand. What do I do with it? One of the most common questions I get. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to give you financial advice about what specific product to put it in. That's not what my role is. What my role is to give you the education that you can then go out and do the research and figure out what you are interested in and what you want to put your money into that aligns with your timeline. So when we look at investing, there are three very important things that we need to know, which are more important than the actual investment. So the first one is your investment time frame. So what that means is, when do you need to access this money? And is it a set time? So let's say you say, I'm going to go back and do my master's degree in 2 years from today. And that's the day that classes start. So in 18 months, I have to pay a $50,000 tuition fee, right? You know that there's no flexibility on that time frame. 18 months, 50 grand, that's what you need. When we know a hard date like that, and it's, call it less than 24 months, so less than 2 years, we need to know that that money is going to be there when we need to access it. So we're not going to put it in crypto. We're not going to put it in risky investments that are going to fluctuate up and down like crazy, like a yo-yo over the next 18 months, because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know if it's going to be down or up or flatlined when we need to access it. But we know that on December 1st of XYZ year, we need to pull out $50,000. So when we know that our investment time frame is short like that, and there's a hard date finish, we want to look at things that are cash or cash equivalents. So what that means is things like high interest savings accounts, government bonds, or in Canada, we have what's called GICs, in Australia, term deposits, anything that is going to give you a guaranteed return. Your money is going to come out of it at the end of the day, and you're not shooting the lights out in terms of how much you earned, but you're preserving your capital, right? You're preserving your initial investment. So you put 30 grand in, you know that in 18 months, you're going to have 41,000 or whatever once you've included all the interest. So that's called cash or cash equivalents. Then if we start extending our time frame out to about 3 to 5 years, then we can start taking on a little bit more risk. We may have a combination strategy where we might keep some in cash and we might put some money into fixed interest or bonds and things like that, or hybrid investments. And then we might put the rest in the stock market. And the stock market is going to be our high earn, high return, but it's going to be higher risk. So the higher the risk, the higher return, but also the inverse can happen, right? The higher the risk, the more you could lose as well. So you can have a combination strategy where you don't have to say, I'm going to put all $30,000 of my money into the stock market, because if you need to pull out some of it, then you want to still know that there's a little bit still there. So then you might have sort of a 60-40 split or a 30-70 split between different asset classes. And I'll go into what that means later, because that's also a very important point. So then we look at, okay, we don't need to touch this money for 7+ years, 7 to 10 or 10+ years. This is our long-term savings vehicle. Then what can we look at? When we're looking at a longer time period where there's no definitive end date, and we say, yeah, I could buy a place in 10 years, but if it's 12, I don't mind. That's when we can start taking on more risk, having a more aggressive portfolio, and dabbling in different things that are on the stock market. Maybe you do a little bit in crypto or in some other unlisted investments, NFTs or whatever it is. And you can start taking on a little bit more risk here and there. But you need to know that when you are taking on more risk, you must be flexible, because you're not going to want to panic sell when it hits the bottom of the market and all of a sudden you've lost the other 7 years of growth just because you've got a dip in that 8th or 9th year. You're allowing it to ride out the inevitable peaks and valleys of the investment swings. And you say, you know what, whether it's 10 years or 12 years doesn't really matter to me. I'll just sit on this investment and watch it recover. Okay. So that's number one. Most important thing that you need to know about money is your investment time frame. So we usually say 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10, and then 10+ would be sort of the brackets. Then we look at the next important thing, which is our asset classes. So asset classes, what that means is things like property. Property is its own asset class. So you can buy things like REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. So you can buy a portion of a commercial building, for example, on a stock exchange, or you can buy a physical property. You could buy a townhouse or a condo or a house. You can use it as an investment property. You can buy things like direct stocks. You can buy things like gold. So owning a brick of gold is its own asset class. You can own things like luxury cars or art collections or, any other sort of obscure personal belonging, jewelry, for example. Then there's cash. And as we talked about before, fixed interest. And all of these different asset classes are going to have a different risk associated with it. And cash is obviously the least risky because the government guarantees it. So if the bank crashes in Australia, the government guarantees like up to $250,000. So if you've got $250,000 in a bank account and Commonwealth Bank implodes, the government will intervene and they'll give you your $250,000 back. So that's why cash is the safest. Then you go up the tier and it goes fixed interest, and then it goes property, and then it goes, obviously the listeners can't see what I'm doing with my hands, but think of it like a rainbow, a half of a rainbow, right? So we go cash at the very bottom, then we go fixed interest next, then we go into property, which would be slightly higher, and then into stocks. So stocks are going to have more risk, but they are a higher return. So when you are looking at your investment strategy, understanding that you're taking into account your investment time frame, but you're also taking into account what you're actually investing in, which is your asset allocation or your assets. And then we're going to look into, well, what is actually in alignment with your values, right? So if you're somebody that's really into the environment, you're not going to invest in mutual funds that are investing into things like oil and gas or tobacco and gaming or alcohol or whatever, right? So there's all these different factors that we look at. And that's why people think that investing is so complicated, because they think they need to be an expert in all of these different areas before they dabble in different things. But that is absolutely not the case. You can learn about how to get involved in investing very, very easily, very inexpensively now, and just start trying. Because the thing that people worry about the most is losing money. So they're like, well, if I have it in my bank account, I can't lose it. But if you're having it in your bank account and it's earning 0.0% interest, you are losing it because the cost of inflation, the cost of living, cost of everything is going up. So your money is actually going backwards. It's going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. So keeping in mind that while you're growing your savings for your first property, if you are saying, yeah, I want to buy a house in 5 years realistically, you can afford to take on a little bit of risk with your savings that you are accumulating towards that house down payment. And by doing that, you're going to start making your money work for you, which is how you're going to grow that pot of savings faster and ultimately build wealth. That was a lot. I feel like people are going to need to go back and listen to that again.
That was so valuable, though. I actually highly recommend you do, because that was all of the basics on investments, right? And all of that was so necessary for context on how to actually invest, right? My next question is, and some listeners may be thinking this, is, okay, that all sounds really juicy and good and exciting, but how do I get to the point of having money to invest, right? And I want to talk a bit on this first, because when I was younger, I think I was like 19 or something, I just moved to Sydney. I had just finished my first year of uni, and I read this book called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it was a life-changing book for me. It was so good. And it's basically on how the richest man in Babylon became the richest man in Babylon. And it's set like, thousands of years ago or something, or hundreds, thousands, whatever, of years ago. And one of the main things that I took from that book was even when your income increases, don't increase your lifestyle. Like save that
living.
yeah, your standard of living. So I went from in my first year of uni, super broke, working 3 jobs, had just moved to Sydney, studying full time. Like I really didn't have that much money, but I was still managing to save about $50 a week. Like that was, what I aimed to save. Then I took a gap year and I started working at a bank and, not studying. I was just taking a year off between first and second year, and my income rose significantly from, working in hospitality and retail and stuff. But I I remained the same standard of living, and I managed to save a lot in that year. And I've always done that. And we were talking before about how even in my business, like I've got a company set up and we pay me the same amount every month, even if I have a huge month, I'm just kind of still keeping the same level of income. And Vic could leave his job. Like he could actually at the end of the year retire if he wanted to, but we're sort of like planning for him to have a year off, and he's got quite a lot of leave.
Yeah.
And potentially still go back, because as you said at the beginning of this episode, we are in those wealth creation years. So why would we not take advantage of that? So can we talk a bit about that concept of not necessarily raising your standard of living just because you've come into money or you've managed to give yourself a pay rise, whether that's in your business or in your job? You gave such amazing advice on this, Sandra, in the last episode on how to actually get a pay rise as a woman. How do we make sure that we're being savvy enough with our money that we are actually saving and thinking about investments?
Before we go on, I want to ask you a super powerful question. What would it mean to you to make decisions based on your soul rather than your bank balance? Freedom to me means having true autonomy and choice in your life to live based off your values and soul's desires, rather than what you can purely afford for you and your family or what your job requires of you. This is why I've been empowering women for the past almost 5 years to earn more with pleasure, earning your true worth without the insane hustle and with actually having choice in your life. It is so much more about how you earn rather than what you earn. If you'd like to learn more about how I mentor women to earn a time-leveraged income online, selling conscious, health-based products and learning the skills of personal branding and attraction marketing, both very sexy skills to have, then click on the link in the show notes or DM me the word info on Instagram so we can have a proper chat. I love having one-on-one convos with you savvy queens and showing you how this kind of income and our community can help you truly live wildly empowered. Big love, back to the episode.
Yeah, I love that question. And I feel like what we're doing right now is that we're actually reverse engineering, right? We started talking about high net worth, then we started talking about how you've got that $30,000 in savings, what to do with it. Now it's almost like we're talking about how do you even get the 30,000? How do you get to that point, right? And what I love about this is one of the most important sessions that I do with my clients. It's the 4th session in our private client in my private client program. And what we do is we go over a budget. Now, disclaimer, everyone says they know how to do a budget, but nobody knows what to actually do with the budget. Okay. So when we look at our budget, if you've never done one before, the basic math is your income minus your expenses is your end result, and we'll call it your net income. So your net income, it's either going to be a positive or a negative number. So if it's a positive, we call it a surplus. If it's a negative, we call it a deficit. When we look at how to start saving money, I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, when I work with clients who are earning over $200,000 as a household income, they are running a deficit every year. And it's because they don't track what they're spending. Every time they go through this exercise, they always come to me and they're like, oh my God, now we know why we're not getting ahead. Because they're spending way too much money on usually 3 particular areas. So this is free financial advice for anyone listening. If you look at your credit card statements for the last 12 months, I can, with 99% accuracy tell you where you are overspending. Number 1, eating out. Number 2, Amazon or online purchases. And number 3 is some form of entertainment or clothes shopping, whatever your thing is. Everyone has their one thing, right? So for guys, it's usually sports of some sort, whether it's going to events or whatever. For women, it's usually shopping. So those 3 areas, if you can tighten the screws on those 3 areas, and we're not talking big sacrifices, one less dinner out a week, one, or DoorDash or whatever. If you accumulate that over the year, what I often find is by making even just a minor adjustment to those 3 areas, we can actually save couples almost $10,000 a year from those three areas. So if we're looking at, okay, what do we do with that 10,000? How do we develop the self-discipline to actually start putting that away, right? We go, okay, when you get paid, and whether you get paid fortnightly or monthly, regardless, every time you get paid, that you have to put money aside for rent. You have to put money aside for your mortgage, your phone bill, your blah, 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 whatever else. So treating your savings as if it's a fixed expense and putting it aside before you spend it, as opposed to waiting until the end of the month to see what's left and then go, oh, there's, $100 left. I'll put that into savings. But last month you were you were doing a cleanse or whatever, and you saved $500 because you weren't eating out as much. If you want to say your savings target for the year, I'll just use round numbers, is $6,000, which is $500 a month. You can say, I'm going to treat that $500 as if it's a bill. I'm going to transfer it into another bank account that is going to be out of sight, out of mind. Maybe it's with an entirely different bank so that you don't even see it when it's in your online banking. Like ING is a free online, bank that you don't have a debit card and stuff for. So then there's the physical barrier of it's in there. You can't automatically transfer it back to your daily savings account. So then, if you're having a night out and you're having a few too many drinks and you're like, oh yeah, I really could use a few extra $100 in my account right now. I'll just transfer it from my savings and I'll pay it back next time, which we know never happens. If it's in a separate account, right? If it's in a totally separate account with a separate bank, you're not even going to see it. And that's the only way that if you've got a spending problem, if you've got a saving problem, that's the only way that people can actually get ahead, is by out of sight, out of mind, right? As if you're paying your rent, but it's just not rent. So when you start treating it like a bill and you start being really diligent, whether you have an automatic transfer, if you get paid on the 1st of the month, on the 2nd of the month, you've got $500 automatically transferring into this other account. Then once you start to accumulate a bit of a balance, and we can say, call it $2,000, just start investing in easy things. Index funds. They're cheap, they're cheerful, they're highly diversified. So again, when we talked about the different asset classes, you want to have a mix. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, because if the stock market crashes, you need to have some cash. There's got to be all different kinds of things in your portfolio that are going to make up that basket, right? And so that diversification is really easy to achieve with an index fund. So you don't need to be some, financial tech wizard to know what each company is doing and how to rate their profits and losses and all this. You just don't need to know that. You do some research on index funds. There's the ASX 300, there's the S&P 500, there's the NASDAQ, there's Dow Jones, there's all different kinds of index funds. And you just pick whichever one you want. You put a little bit of money into that one, you put a little bit of money into that one, a little bit of money into this one, and you just leave it alone for 5 to 7 years. And you can watch it go up and down, but it's a set and forget strategy that will help you eventually start to make your money work for you. And don't be alarmed if the first month that you put money in, it all of a sudden drops and then you're like, my $2,000 went down to 1,700. It's totally normal for things like that to happen. And that's why we talk about that investment time frame piece, where we're going to ride out those peaks and valleys and, roller coaster effect of the stock market, because you're not going to pull that money out. You're leaving it there despite what your emotional intelligence is telling you. Your intellectual intelligence is going to tell you to leave it there. Okay. So That is one of the most important things. But what people don't realize is that you don't have to save $500 a month to get ahead. As you said before, it's $50 a week. What's one thing that you're spending way too much money on? A lot of people, it's like $7 for a coffee now. $7 for a coffee. Maybe you're having coffee at home 3 days a week instead of at the cafe 5 days a week. And you allow yourself that flexibility to have coffees on Thursdays and Fridays when your brain's starting to tap out and you just need that little morning, dose of sunshine. So we're not talking about making extreme differences to your life, but all of the minute little changes that you make, the tiny sacrifices along the way, are going to have a compounding effect if you start doing them regular, often, and as early as possible. The younger you get started, the bigger of an impact this has, as opposed to just saying, when I hit 60,000, when I hit 80,000, when I hit 100,000. I will tell you, you will never make enough for your living expenses if you constantly increase your living expenses to meet your new salary. You will be constantly chasing your tail. And that's exactly what you said about Richest Man in Babylon. If you're living a comfortable life on $70,000 a year, when you start making $100,000 a year, you now have 30 minus tax that you can start doing other things with. And when you start making that 30 work for you and start earning money on that 30, that's how you create wealth.
Such good advice. And so something else that I know you're very, very good at, and I know a lot of listeners will fall into this category, is helping entrepreneurs to know their numbers a little bit more in their business. And also, like you said, I feel like a lot of people probably fall into that category of maybe they have a business or an online, hustle of some sort, and their partner's working. What do we need to look at in terms of our business numbers? Because we all know, if you treat it like a business, it will pay like one. But what should we really be across in our business numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when we look at the difference between our business and our personal, the concept is really the same. It's just a different entity, right? So our business is like its own human, right? They're an income generating, income producing company, and they've got a mind of its own. And ultimately, what happens in that business stays within that business until you pay it out, right, to yourself. So what we want to look at with our business is kind of like looking at it from our home. With our home, we know we have the mortgage payments, we know we have the phone bill and the utilities, and we've got XYZ, kids daycare and things like that, and grocery bill. Our business is no different. It's just a different concept, right? So rather than having our salary that we work at the bank and we get paid $60,000 a year and that's what we get, and then we take our net of $60,000 home and we pay our bills, within our business, we say, okay, let's say we're making $100,000 a year, and our business expenses for the year, which are solely related to the business, not our personal, are $50,000, so half. So then we go, okay, now we know we've got $50,000 left over. What do we need to do with that? Well, you can pay yourself a $50,000 salary for the year, and then your, salary expense comes out of your business, so it's tax deductible to your business, and your income, your personal income, now becomes $50,000 because you're paying yourself from your own company rather than being paid from the bank or from Lululemon or from whatever your employer is, right? So your company is your own employer. When you're looking at your company, the $1 million question is, how much do you pay yourself? Because if your company is earning $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, but you only need $80,000 to live off to meet your living expenses and your personal goals, what do you start doing with the rest, right? And this is a really, really interesting question, because if you're earning, say, under $100,000 in your business, which I would say most people are, they're usually consuming everything that they're earning, right? So they're going to their business expenses, then whatever's left over, they're paying themselves. And they might start with paying themselves $3,000 a month, but ultimately they want to be paying themselves $10,000 a month, right? So once we get up to that point where we can start paying ourselves that $10,000 a month, and that's all we need to take out, what do we do with anything above that? So there's a couple of different strategies. Your business can also invest. It can also have investments into maybe a property. Maybe you buy an office space. Maybe you buy a warehouse. Maybe you buy physical product. You can use money within your business to invest in other things. Now, the benefit of doing that is businesses have a lower tax rate than most people's personal marginal tax rate. So any income that is earned on the investments that are within your business are going to be paying less tax than any investments in your personal name, right? So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. Now, obviously, you need to seek your own tax advice. You need to make sure that that strategy works for you and all of that, because everybody's business is different. But you can keep money within your corporation, within your business, until you need to start paying yourself, because maybe you have a couple of really good years. Let's say you have 3 years in a row where you make $350,000. Then, as a business owner, maybe you take a maternity leave and you decide that you want to take a full year off or work a part year. And maybe that year you wind back all these operations and you only earn $60,000 that year. But you want to still be paying yourself that $120,000 salary, which is 10 grand a month. You can then start pulling out more of the money that's within your business and spreading out your income over multiple years when you have years that are less profitable or less money coming in. So then you're not paying a whack of tax in year 1, 2, and 3 and virtually no tax in year 4. You can say, okay, well, I know that I only need to take that 120 out. So I'm going to pay myself 120. I know exactly what my tax amount is going to be on that 120, 120, 120. You're keeping your nest egg within your business. And then that year that you've got $60,000 of income, you're topping it up with another $60,000 that's sitting in your business already, and it's working for you, accumulating more money. You then take that other $60,000 in to top up your income in year 4 to $120,000. And then you're keeping your tax the same, you're keeping your income the same, and you're keeping your tax within your corporation lower than if you were to pay yourself out that $350,000, which you don't necessarily need because you're not paying off debts. You don't need to burn $350,000 a year. So there's all these different kinds of strategies that you can start looking at once your business starts making good money and you're not just your burn rate is less than 100%. So you're not, you've got money left over that you're like, well, I don't need to use that. I don't need to pay tax on that right now, in your personal name. So these are all little strategies that it's really important to get your head around. It sounds complex, but it's really not. And what I do with my clients that are business owners, because I would say about 70% of my client base right now are a combination between one business owner in a couple and one salaried employee. And it's, I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs. I'd say most of my clients that one of the partner is an entrepreneur is the female. And what we do is we say, okay, well, your husband's bringing in $150,000 a year. You're bringing in $300,000 a year in your business, but you only need 70. What do we do with the rest? That's when we go and we meet with the accountant. We bring the accountant into the conversation. And from a tax planning perspective, we all work together and we say, well, what's the most tax effective strategy to pay some of that money out of your business into your pocket? Maybe that's 70. Maybe you were paying yourself 70 because you thought you couldn't pay yourself more. And you actually want to be paying yourself 100, but you didn't know if you could, right? That's another thing that people sometimes do. I just did this with a client recently. She's only paying herself $45,000 a year, but their income, their business is earning over $250,000 a year. She just thought, oh, I just need to save it in the business in case we need to use it for the business. But it's like, no, we can actually bump up your income to a comfortable level that you can live off of. So all of these different questions, and if this sounds complicated to you, this is why you need to seek support in it, right? This is why you need to reach out to a financial professional. We look at professionals for legal advice. We look at professionals for tax advice. We look at personal trainers for weight loss advice. If your finances are the one thing that are most confusing and most stressful to you, it is the most important thing for you to start addressing, because it has a flow-on effect into every other aspect of your life, whether we like to admit it or not, right? And it's usually the one area of people's life that they ignore the most because they have shame around it. They don't like asking stupid questions. They don't want to seem dumb. And like, I can't even tell you how many people come to me and they're just like, I know this is a stupid question. I'm like, no question is a stupid question. The reason you're here is the biggest step in the first place, right? It's the, hey, I don't know what I don't know, and I need to know it if I ever want to get ahead.
This is such a valuable conversation around numbers and knowing not only like in your business, absolutely, but knowing what to pay yourself and your tax and your expenses and whatnot. And I'm certainly not, I have some room for improvement in that respect in my business. However, I do try and keep as much as a finger on the pulse as I possibly can. And also Vic works in finance. He does all my zero, reconciliation each month. So we do talk a lot about it. But I'll never forget hearing like a wealth coach talk about the fact that no wealthy person has no idea what their expenses are. Like no wealthy person is not across like what their outgoings are and what their income is and, their numbers. So that always stuck with me. And as I said, room for improvement, definitely on my part on that. And I can't wait to work with you as a couple.
Everyone.
Yeah, in the year, like I can see like we are just going to get so much value from that. But in terms of like, if anyone's sort of getting, because we're talking established businesses here, right? Like your clients and certainly where I am in business, I've been in business for 5 years. Business is doing really well. Like for someone maybe just starting out that's not quite there yet, what should they be focusing on?
Yeah, good question. The biggest thing is spending less than you earn. The first 4 years of business, and I'm going to rewind here for a second. I have a real problem with all these internet coaches telling people that you can become a millionaire in a year if you follow their 3-step program. That is absolute bullshit. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on here.
Go for it.
When you are building a business, be prepared to not pay yourself for the first 2 years. And what I mean by that is your business expenses are going to be as much or more than your business income. It's just factual information. If you are actually able to pay yourself in those first 2 years, you are killing it. And you are the 5% of businesses that is actually able to turn a profit in year 1 and 2. So if you're in year 1 and 2 and you're like, oh my God, this is taking forever. When am I ever going to see the light of day again? Just know that if you're feeling this, you are still on the right track. You keep going. You are on the right track. Year 3 is when people start to break even, which means your income and your expenses are starting to match. And then you start to create this tipping point where all of a sudden your income starts superseding your expenses. So going above your expenses. And that's when people get excited. That's when they blow a bunch of money on a $20,000 mastermind. They go on a $15,000 holiday. They buy a new car. They do all these things because for the first time in 3 years, they are earning good money. And this is the biggest mistake that I see people make in the early stages of their business, is going way above their means as soon as they hit that sort of quote unquote jackpot in their business and see that page turning, right? So the number one thing that you can do is riding that out, reinvesting some of that money back into yourself or into some sort of cash buffer account that that you might have a $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 month or quarter. And you're like, yes, that's going to be every quarter from now on. But we know that that's not how business works. And the next 3 months, you might have zero income. So you need to prepare yourself for those months, and you need to be patient with the process of starting your business and getting yourself organized financially. Don't quit your day job too early. Just because you've had a big month or out-earned your salary job doesn't mean that that's going to happen month after month after month. What I like to say is wait until you've had consistent 12 months consecutively of the same or higher income before you make a large decision like quitting your job. Because you might have 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, and then all of a sudden you have 3, 2, 1, 1,500, 2,000, 10,000, 10,000. So over that 12-month period, you might be like, oh, the first 5 months of the year, I hit 10,000. I'm good. I can quit my job. But then as soon as you quit your job, it drops down to 1,500 because the seasons could be anything, right? Could be a recession, could be anything. So we want to say at least 12 months of consistent income before you make any big decisions about what to do with your steady income. Then once you do start having that more consistent income within your business, start to practice putting some aside to pay yourself, right? Because you obviously got to pay your business expenses first to keep your business going. Then anything on top of that, you're going to pay yourself. If you're paying yourself too early, then all of a sudden your expenses are going on your credit card. And then you're like, crap, now I paid myself. I spent the money in my personal life. And now I've got all these expenses within my business. Maybe you've got a $10,000 website upgrade or whatever. Where's that money going to come from? Right? You got to keep some money in your business to be able to reinvest back into the business to then grow it in future. Whatever that number is, whatever that multiple is, will depend on what kind of business you have. But the biggest takeaway, if you hear anything from this, is every single entrepreneur that I have A, worked with, or B, interviewed on my podcast, and I've got about 80 episodes on my own podcast, every single one of them said that they did not start earning quote unquote good money until after their 4th year in business. So if you are in that 1 to 4 years, you are on that initial entrepreneur roller coaster. The most important thing that you can do in your business and your finances is be consistent. Just stop letting, Sally's review on your Google page get you down. Stop letting that negative comment on your social media post make you feel like all of a sudden you can't do this, or that 3 months in a row of virtually no income. That happens to every single one of us, whether you are a product-based business, an online-based business, a bricks and mortar business, a hair salon. Every single month will look different for the first 4 years, but it's the consistency of all of those building blocks and the learning that you go throughout that time period that will have a compounding effect that in year 5, if you can last those first 4 years, I guarantee you year 5 will be a fruitful year for you.
I am sitting on my yoga ball here, 38 weeks pregnant, so I don't sit on chairs anymore, and I'm almost giving myself whiplash nodding at what you're saying, because I could not agree more with everything you just said. And to put it into like a applicable example, I, exactly like you said, for 12 months, replaced my income for 12 months consistently before I left my job in PR. And, I was an account director, had to replace a pretty good salary, and I didn't do that. I didn't leave too prematurely. And this is what I always say as well, is like, make sure you've replaced it and some, so that, you can account for the big months, little months, whatever. Like, it's never going to be a consistent number, right? We know that, exactly like you said. And the other thing was, in that year, I had the privilege of having a job, right? So in that year when I was building my business, I reinvested all that money back into my business. And I'm not saying this is everyone's scenario. You might need it. But for me, I was like, I want to grow as quickly as I possibly can. So it makes sense to me to reinvest that back into myself with coaches or into my business.
Yep.
And
absolutely,
exactly like you said, the 4th year. So in July will be my 5th year doing high ticket affiliate marketing, right? My 5th year will be my 5th year anniversary will be in July. And the last year has, like, the last 12 months from July to July will have been my biggest year to date. And
absolutely,
as we spoke about, nothing has changed in my lifestyle. I'm not out there driving a freaking Mercedes or, going on an extravagant holidays. Like nothing has really changed. And I actually said to my husband the other day, I was like, it's funny because I don't actually, like I just hit a big milestone and I celebrated a little bit, but I was like, I don't really feel like it's properly sunk in because nothing's changed in our life. And he was like, you have no idea how much we would be struggling right now if your income hadn't increased. And I hadn't actually looked at that, right? Another reason why you should be across your numbers.
Well, so it just gave me chills. That literally just gave me chills.
He was like,
I know exactly that feeling.
Because we are.
And this is the problem is that, people are afraid that the struggle is going to last forever. And so they give up. They go back to their day job. They give up after 18, 24 months of doing both. But I tell you, the wealthiest people that I've ever seen are the people that have worked 2 jobs for so long until they were so confident in their second, more passionate job that they had the ability and the choice to be able to leave that with a runway of 12 months set up for them so that if there was anything that fluctuated in that first year that they quit their job, that they would be okay. And that's the thing, like people just get impatient, right? They get impatient, they get frustrated. We live in this instant gratification world where every 6 seconds something has to happen on a TV show to keep you engaged. Otherwise, you're going to flip to the next TV show, whatever. It's the same in our lives, right? And like you said, it's sticking it out. And you think nothing's changed, but actually a lot has changed. And probably the most change has happened within you, right? Your knowledge, your experience, how you show up in your business, all these learnings that have happened within you over that 4 years has made you who you are to have your most successful year in your 5th year. Because you yourself, even though your living expenses are the same, you are a completely different person in your 5th year than you are in your 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Yeah. And that's why your business is doing well.
Totally. And right. I think people grossly overestimate what they'll make in their first year, and they grossly underestimate what they'll make in that 4th, 5th, beyond year. And I certainly did. A lot of business attracts driven people, right? So of course we're going to go in with high goals and shoot for the stars and want to make 100K in our first year in business and all of that, which is amazing. And it is possible. It's not that that's not possible. It's that shouldn't be the goal, because if you're going into business, it is a long-term strategy. Like you said, it's a 5-year plan, and a lot of businesses and a lot of, I guess, the people that are attracted to businesses are very hard on themselves because they are goal-orientated and driven and that red type personality. And it's like, if you can stick with it, you're always going to succeed, right? It's just like you said, the consistency, which I love that message. And I'm so for that message it's the consistency. And actually I recently did a podcast on the years and years behind the overnight success, because I feel like the last 12 months I've had overnight success. Like my income has like quadrupled. And it's not because of what I did the last year. It's because of what I've done the last 10 years.
Exactly. It's the building blocks and the foundation and the trial and error. This worked. Okay, that didn't. Okay, this worked. That didn't. We're going to cancel the things that didn't work, and we're going to do more of the things that did work. There's all these little adjustments that happen along the way, right? And regardless of what kind of business it is, you'd never walk into a university and say, I want a degree in 3 months. I want to walk out with a bachelor degree after year 1. Like, you're in it for a 4-year ride. So why go into business thinking that you're going to quit your day job in 12 months? Like, that's just not how it works, right? If you want to change your life, you have to be prepared to change your life. And that means sitting with it and doing the grunt work, doing the boring stuff, doing the stuff that is like you'd way rather be having a glass of wine and watching Selling Sunset than doing a social media post about your product or your service that you feel like you're a broken record talking about. But it just so happens that Sally, your next customer, just took a social media break, and today's the day that she's coming back on, and today's the day that she's going to see your post and contact you, right? So it's like you just never know who's watching. You never know what the time is for them when they need to hear this. There's going to be some people that listen to episode 20 and be like, wow, that was cool. And then they're going to listen to this one and they're going to be like, now's the time, right? Because timing is everything. And it's not your responsibility to determine your future client's timing. The more consistent you can be, they will come to you when they're ready. I had a network marketing business for 4 years. And the first 2 years, I was bringing in peanuts. Like, we're talking peanuts. But every single month after month, I was posting these transformations. I was doing this, doing that. And then in year 4, I was able to leave my corporate job to create my new business because of this residual income that I had created over the last 3.5 years, right? While I was working full-time and studying full-time. So if you really want to get ahead, you might have to take 1 to 3 years of hardcore focus and patience to build the next 25 years of your life. But would you take 3 to 4 years of hardcore sacrifices where you're saying no to social events that don't serve you, where you are not buying all this stuff online and not going shopping, you're not eating out nearly as much, you're cooking the same boring crap every night because you're saving money, but that means the next 5-7 years after that, you can live a much more fruitful life. 25 years, like, that's how you get wealthy. You got to make those sacrifices early.
This is exactly what Vic and I did when we bought our first property. I had said to him, we got together when I was like 20 and I was like, my goal is to buy my first house by 21. And I was like, you can either go in with me and we'll buy somewhere in Sydney, or I'm going to do it myself anyway, like whether you come in with me or not, and I'm going to buy in the country because that's all I will be able to afford. And we ended up going in together. We weren't even, I think we were living together, but we weren't engaged or anything. So our first commitment together was actually buying our first apartment. I was like 22. So, and I was comfortable with that. It was 50-50. It was all, if we had it broken up, it would have been fine. But we lived off pasta and tin tuna and not spending a cent on anything really for years. And so now, I'm just turned 33. We have a house on the Northern Beaches. We've just knocked down. We're rebuilding. We're renting for a year. Because of what I did back then when I was literally 22, because we sold that house and we sold that apartment after like about 7 years and used that as a deposit for this house and the rebuild and whatnot that we're doing. So it's like, it always is the small things that you think, my $50 a week, this is where it all stemmed from. My $50 a week that I was saving when I was 19 is
19, exactly.
Yeah, it was like the beginning of my deposit for this shitty little apartment that we had in the inner west in Sydney, which we just held on to for long enough. We sold it not at a great price, but at a decent-ish price and used that. And it's like, it's all those small steps in the long-term strategy and the long-term viewpoint. Yeah.
Totally. And I think that, what we see online is not reality. And we got to remember that. So when you see people building their business, they're only talking about their wins. They're only talking about their success once they've hit it, right? When I first started my business, as a financial planner, I was earning well over 6 figures. And I went to living off of, I think it was like $17,000 in my first year. And I invested about $50K of my own money into my business. So I was at a net loss of $35,000 and I'm a financial coach, right? So people don't talk about this stuff because it's not sexy. It's not alluring. It's not interesting. But my first year, net loss of $35,000. My second year, I think I broke even at, $30K because you match your expenses and your thing. But eventually you get to a point where you're working 14-hour days. You're doing everything that you possibly can, trial and error. Launch this, didn't work. Okay, launch that, didn't work. Launch this, great, that worked. Do more of that. And it's that trial and error process that eventually gets you to a point. Now, my goal was not to own a property. Property prices in Vancouver are so insanely high that it's like $1 million for a 1-bedroom apartment in some places, which is outrageous. So for me, my goal was to have location independence and the freedom to travel and work from anywhere. So now, 3 years after I've started my business, I'm now able to go to Las Vegas for a week and work from my hotel in Vegas and then go out for dinner that night. I just spent 3 months in Melbourne and I was able to work in Melbourne, visit my friends that I hadn't seen in 3 years, and still run my business. But everyone's going, oh my God, how did you just travel for 5 months of the year in 2023? And I'm like, well, it's not that I'm traveling for 5 months. It's that I spent the last 3 years sitting at home doing sweet F all, working until 2 and 3 in the morning, making sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice so that this year I could afford to live my dream life and work from anywhere, work from LA, work from New York, or go to Mykonos this summer, and my business will still keep going. That was my goal, right? So whatever your goal is, it's achievable. Just know that it doesn't happen overnight. And that's the number one takeaway, whether it's you want to go live around the world and travel, or you want to build and buy your dream home. Like in your case, you're renovating your dream home and you're paying rent on a second, for your living expenses. So you're paying 2 living expenses right now. And that's what most people don't understand, is that you can afford to pay 2 household living expenses, because while you're renovating, you're still required to pay mortgage and property tax and water connection and all of these things. And you're paying it on your rental, right? You weren't doing that at 19 and 22, but the choices that you made then allowed you to do that now. And this is the point that I want to drive home. Whether you invest in property or something else, it's just this steady and often consistency, just like building your business, just like losing weight, just like whatever it is that you want to do in your life.
Before we wrap up this episode, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember how you discovered this podcast? Was it a friend's suggestion or an Instagram story, maybe a post? Somehow you found it, and I'm hoping you're getting a lot of value from it. I need your help now to pay it forward so that other women can feel seen, heard, nourished, and more than anything, empowered from these conversations too. Big love, back to the episode.
Love that. So if anyone wants to work with you or go and stalk you and check out your amazing offers, because I just get so excited by your courses, like the topics and the content of them are so incredibly valuable. Where should they go to check them out?
Yeah, great question. So my website is going to be the hub of everything. So you can find my podcast on there, which is Make That Money Honey podcast. You can find my courses. So I've got my virtual courses. I've got one coming by the time this podcast is out on how to invest in your first property, how to destroy your debt, how to increase your passive income and create passive income streams. So those 3 are virtual courses. I've got a money mastery bundle, which is everything you need to know about basic finances, getting into investments, all the things that we talked about today, but in more detail and with workbooks and little activities and things that you can do with it. So those are my virtual courses, and those will be on my website as well. Then if you want to work with me one-on-one, that's the only other way to work with me, is going to my private clients. So I've got the Entrepreneur Accelerator program, which is working with entrepreneurs. It's 3 sessions, 90-minute calls. We go deep into your business, look at what you're doing well, what you need to improve on, and how you can grow. And then there's the private client coaching, which is really my bread and butter. That's 85% of my business. And that's working with one-on-one clients, getting their whole financial picture set up. And that's called Your Financial Future. You can do that as a single person or as a couple. The price is the same. I work with couples, singles, business owners, salaried employees, everything. So you can check out my website, sandrajoe.com. Joe is my last name. And yeah, I hope to see you there, because my Instagram is kind of my last priority right now. I definitely have my courses, my clients, my podcast and all of that. So find me on Instagram, makethatmoney.honey. And that will be where I announce when everything is coming live and how you can work with me, and also when I have sales and promos.
Amazing. And I would highly recommend going and listening to episode 20 as well, because you dropped so much value in there and a lot about your background.
Yes.
And such a good episode. If I do say so myself, but I mean mostly because what you shared.
Yeah. My vision and why I've started my business, I think on that episode really stood out for me.
Yeah.
If you don't know my background, if you're like, wow, this was really cool, I learned so much, I really strongly encourage you to go back and listen to that episode and why I started my business. I'm so passionate about helping people get out of their shitty financial situations, whether it's a job, a relationship, a household, your family upbringing, whatever. That is something that is really near and dear to my heart.
There was some really good examples in that episode as well. So
yes,
go and check out Sandra. Also, if you gained some tips, some value, like there was just so much dropped in this episode, please do reach out to us. I know Sandra would love to hear it.
Yeah,
I would love to hear it. Screenshot the episode, tag us in your stories, and remember to subscribe. And if you're feeling really generous, rate and review this episode, because I love having on the same guests on this podcast so that we can deliver different topics. And as you've heard today, like, there was just so much we could have even dived even deeper into.
I know, it took hours.
We could have, but we sort of kept it on investments and, like how to know your numbers as an entrepreneur. But if you do have other topics that you'd love to know, especially from Sandra, like please do get in touch, because this woman just has so much value to give. So thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me again. I feel so fortunate to be on your podcast. I absolutely love chatting to you. I love chatting to your audience. I feel like you and I just gel so well together. So thank you for having me for the second time.
Absolute pleasure. And we will see you on the next episode, lovelies. We'll leave it there.